Over the years, I have taken a look at the worst signing in world football every season, the best signing every season, and the most expensive. Well, today it is the turn of the most controversial. I'm talking about transfers like Alfredo Di Stefano to Real Madrid, after Barcelona, not Real Madrid, had agreed a deal with Di Stefano's last official club River Plate, radically altering the entire future course of Spanish football, Roberto Baggio joining Juventus from Fiorentina in 1990, which led to riots in the streets of Florence, in which bricks, chains and Molotov cocktails injured at least 50 people, or Mo Johnston becoming the first open Roman Catholic to represent Rangers in the post-war era in 1989, just 2 years after starring for Celtic, enraging Rangers and Celtic fans alike. Or how about Ajax legend Johan Cruyff, who, having been scorned by his boyhood club, with whom he won 3 successive European Cups and Ballon d'Ors, after they refused to offer him a new contract, joined their bitter rivals Feyenoord for his final season in football, where he won an Eredivisie and KNVB Cup double, winning the Dutch Footballer of the Year award to boot. Incredible scenes.
Unbelievable, Jeff!
Controversial transfers, eh? Don't you just love them? I hope so, because that is what today's video is all about. If you have no interest in them, to be perfectly honest, this probably isn't the video for you. I'm not quite sure why you clicked on it in the first place though. I mean, I could hardly be accused of clickbait. It does exactly what it says on the tin. Before I begin, did you know that I also have a second channel? No? Well, I'm not surprised. I've only been flashing it up on the screen and shouting it out at the end of videos for the last 2 years. It is no wonder that you missed it. Well, good news, now there is actually some videos on there, one of me visiting the world's biggest football stadium, capacity 250,000, in which I accidentally end up giving a comprehensive history of the Czech Republic. No prizes for guessing where the stadium is then, and one of me attending the Euro 2024 final, where you not only get to see me look miserable at England losing at the end, again, although you will see that, but also some interesting bits about the Olympiastadion in Berlin and the complicated history of the modern German state. I'm also about to upload a video following Georgia's extraordinary journey at the Euros, which was their first ever tournament, which I'm hoping that people will enjoy. I know, it sounds great. So what are you waiting for? Head on over there and subscribe. It is literally free. Right, without further ado then, whose most controversial transfer was probably the one to Benfica at such a young age, although Adu himself maintains that it was his loan move to Monaco that was the most damaging to his development. Here is, in my view, the most controversial transfer every season since the turn of the millennium. 2000 to 2001, Luís Figo to Real Madrid. We start with what is quite possibly the most controversial transfer of the 21st century, and therefore, the most controversial in this entire video. It is difficult to fully contextualize the magnitude of Luís Figo's move from Barcelona to Real Madrid. At the time, Figo was certainly one of, if not the very best player in the world, as evidenced by the fact that he won the Ballon d'Or in 2000, ahead of Thierry Henry, Andrei Shevchenko, and future teammate Zinedine Zidane. In his fifth and final season at the Camp Nou, Figo scored 14 goals and made 16 assists, during an era in which those kinds of numbers were practically unheard of among wingers. Figo was idolised in Catalonia, captain in the club whenever Pep Guardiola was absent, with one teammate stating, quote, "Our plan was simple. Give the ball to Luís. He never ever hid." End quote. Florentino Perez was considered an outsider heading into Real Madrid's presidential election in 2000, having lost previously in 1995, which is often suspected to be why he made the outlandish promise to sign Figo if elected. Sure enough, it worked, with Perez collecting 55% of the vote. It was only once elected that the reality of signing Figo dawned upon Perez and Madrid. There was no way that Barcelona would sell, especially not to them, and it was doubtful whether Figo himself would be keen or willing to make such a move. With no other way of doing the deal, Madrid activated Figo's €62 million release clause, setting a new world record transfer fee. It was, in fact, the first time that Madrid had ever paid a world record-breaking fee, yet each of the next 4 records would be set by them. When Figo accepted Real Madrid's terms, Barcelona fans, somewhat understandably, were apoplectic. Figo must have expected significant animus from the Barcelona fans, but when he returned to the Camp Nou for the first time in October 2000, he appeared visibly surprised by the sheer volume and intensity of resentment, even putting his fingers in his ears to quieten the jeers and boos of 98,000 Catalans before kickoff. From that first game onwards, Figo was constantly pelted with various missiles and projectiles whenever he returned to the Camp Nou, with fullback Michel Salgado refusing to offer him short corners through fear that he too may be struck. On his second trip back, the disturbances became so great whenever Figo took a corner or throw-in that the referee halted the game for 20 minutes. Among the projectiles at that game, most famously of all, was a severed pig's head. Figo committed the cardinal sin, joining an arch rival at the peak of your powers as an established fan favourite. The fact that he was Luís Figo, one of the best players in the world, and that rivalry was one of the biggest and most intense on the planet, makes this hands down one of the most controversial transfers in the entire history of the sport. Other controversial transfers in the 2000-2001 season included Gabriel Batistuta's move from Fiorentina to Roma, and Nicky Barmby leaving Everton to join Liverpool, but neither of those two had a dead pig's head thrown at them, making this a fairly straightforward decision. 2001-02, Sol Campbell to Arsenal. There's no other way of putting it, we get off to a hell of a start in this video. Figo's move to Madrid may be more iconic and more lasting in the minds of most football fans worldwide, even spawning a recent Netflix documentary, but in some ways, Sol Campbell's move from Tottenham to Arsenal the following season was even worse. Why do I say that? Well, as bad as Figo's move to Madrid was, Barcelona did at least pocket a world record-breaking fee for him, an enormous €62 million in 2000, which would be equivalent to about £300 million now, subject to football-specific inflation. Tottenham received absolutely nothing for Sol Campbell, who they had nurtured since the age of 14, helping to develop him into one of the best centre-backs in the world. Losing him for nothing would have been incredibly painful wherever he went, but the fact that he joined Arsenal, Tottenham's bitter North London rivals, well, there is a reason why Spurs fans still refer to him solely as Judas. Campbell had previously stated that he would never play for Arsenal, but he ran his contract down at White Hart Lane, rejecting the biggest contract that Tottenham had ever offered. He turned down offers from several super clubs on the continent in order to join Arsenal, reportedly becoming English football's first £100,000 a week player, and the shock of the deal was exacerbated by the fact that there had been zero rumours or reports about it before Arsenal officially unveiled Campbell at the club's training ground. Fabrizio Romano, look what you took from us. Whereas Barcelona fans can take solace in the fact that, after Figo left, they became the best team on the planet, won countless trophies, and revolutionised the sport, Spurs have won just one League Cup since Campbell departed. Meanwhile, he went on to win 5 trophies, including a historic invincible season at Arsenal. It doesn't get much worse, or much better than that, depending on whether you're an Arsenal or a Spurs fan. 2002-03. Rio Ferdinand to Manchester United. It's not quite Figo or Campbell territory, but Rio Ferdinand leaving Leeds to join their bitterest rivals was still about as fun for Leeds United fans as being stung on the neck by a wasp. I can actually vouch for that. I was once stung on the neck by a wasp at a friend's house, and his mum wanted to take me to A&E in case my throat swelled up and I died, so yeah, quite a personal analogy that I've gone with there, actually.
That's all I needed. That's all I needed for him to do that, and it became personal with me.
Leeds made Ferdinand the most expensive British footballer and the most expensive defender in world football when they signed him from West Ham United in November 2000, and after a year and a half at Ellen Road, Ferdinand broke both records once again, joining Manchester United for a potential £33.3 million. The best defender in England at the time, and among the best in the world, it was the same ambition that took Ferdinand to Leeds, which saw him force his way out. In the 2001-02 season, Leeds missed out on Champions League qualification, convincing Ferdinand that he had to leave, and setting the stage for Leeds' imminent financial implosion. Ferdinand spent 6 hours in the same room as Peter Ridsdale before the Leeds chairman finally agreed to sell him. Over the next 12 years, Ferdinand won 14 trophies at Old Trafford, including 6 Premier League titles. Meanwhile, Leeds were relegated 2 seasons after he left, relegated again in 2008, dropping down into League One, entering administration, and were knocked 10, followed by a further 15 points. 2003-04. David Beckham to Real Madrid. I was tempted to pick Claude Makelele for the 2003-04 season, who Florentino Perez controversially sold to Chelsea in the summer of 03, with some rather unkind words to say about him. Perez stated, and I quote, "We will not miss Makelele. His technique is average, he lacks the speed and skill to take the ball past opponents, and 90% of his distribution either goes backwards or sideways. He wasn't a header of the ball, and he rarely passed the ball more than 3 metres. Younger players will arrive, who will cause Makelele to be forgotten." End quote. Others disagreed. Zinedine Zidane, for example, although what does he know, famously said of Makelele's sale, quote, "Why put another layer of gold paint on the Bentley when you are losing the entire engine?" End quote. Over the next 3 seasons, Real Madrid won absolutely nothing, whereas Makelele won 4 trophies at Chelsea, including 2 Premier League titles. In the end, I went with a Real Madrid incoming, rather than an outgoing though, and that was the arrival of David Beckham. This is the first transfer in this video that I really remember, and I'm not sure that there has been a more culturally significant one, in the sense of dominating the front as well as the back pages of the newspapers, in the 2 decades since. Following a breakdown in Beckham's relationship with manager Alex Ferguson during the 2002-03 season, it began to look increasingly likely that he would leave Manchester United. It was Barcelona, however, who were the frontrunners to sign Beckham, having reached a deal with the Red Devils before, that man again, Florentino Perez, swooped in to break Barca hearts. Beckham was the biggest name in world football, and his statement signing for €37 million cemented Real Madrid's status as the most blockbuster club on the planet. It also created an era-defining domino effect. Manchester United had been poised to sign PSG winger Ronaldinho as Beckham's replacement, but when Barcelona missed out on Beckham to Real Madrid, they stole Ronaldinho from under Ferguson's nose instead. Subsequently, Manchester United took a risk on a young Portuguese-wide player named Cristiano Ronaldo. In some ways, therefore, Real Madrid were actually the big losers of this transfer saga, since Ronaldinho and Ronaldo had much bigger impacts at Barca and Man United than Beckham did in Madrid, but given that they only ended up signing Ronaldo from United in 2009, who went on to win 4 Champions League titles with them, I'd imagine they got over it pretty quick. 2004-05, Nik Crna to Ajax split. When you think of Nik Crna, you probably think of his goal against England in Euro 2008 qualifying, his sweet right and left foot, and his inseparable relationship with Harry Redknapp. But in Croatia, Crna is also remembered for his extremely controversial mid-season transfer from Dinamo Zagreb to Ajax split. Dinamo and Hajduk are Croatia's 2 biggest and most successful clubs, and the eternal derby between them is among the fiercest rivalries in Europe. Few players have transferred directly between the 2 clubs then, but Crna's betrayal was especially painful for Dinamo fans. Crna was the golden boy of Croatian football, he became Dinamo's youngest ever captain, and his father was a Dinamo legend who made over 300 appearances for the club. After just 119 appearances, however, Crna fell out with the senior management at Dinamo and joined bitter rivals Hajduk for just €1.8 million. Crna spent a year and a half at Hajduk, further enhancing his own reputation, both as a player and a lover of controversy, and winning a league title before joining Portsmouth for over €5 million. Honourable mentions go to Nigel Quasi leaving Portsmouth to join Southampton, and Alan Smith following in Rio Ferdinand's footsteps and leaving Leeds for Manchester United. 2005-06, Landon Donovan to LA Galaxy. A bit of a curveball for the 2005-06 season, Landon Donovan is probably the greatest player in the history of Major League Soccer. It came as a bitter blow to San Jose Earthquakes fans, therefore, when Donovan joined their California Clásico rivals LA Galaxy in the summer of 2005. It wasn't a direct transfer. Donovan had technically been on loan with the Earthquakes for the last 4 seasons from Bundesliga side Bayer Leverkusen, but he expressed an interest in taking another stab at making it in Europe. Despite interest from several European clubs, most notably Portsmouth, who seemed to crop up a few times in this video, Donovan instead decided on a return to the US and a return to California. Since San Jose's general manager, the renowned douchebag Alexi Lalas, had traded away Donovan's rights, the Earthquakes were unable to go back in for him. LA Galaxy, however, were able to trade Carlos Ruiz to FC Dallas and snapped Donovan up to the delight of their supporters and the dismay of San Jose fans. Donovan went on to play over 300 games for the Galaxy, winning 4 MLS Cups and making 6 MLS Best 11 inclusions. 2006-07, Ashley Cole to Chelsea. The 2006-07 season was an absolute peach in terms of controversial transfers. West Ham United signed Carlos Tevez and Javier Mascherano in a deal that was so controversial it led to a long-term court case in which the Hammers were ordered to pay Sheffield United around £20 million. John Obi Mikel signed for Chelsea after he had already done a press conference in a Manchester United shirt, stating his delight at joining the club, with Man United assistant Carlos Queiroz later claiming that Mikel had actually been kidnapped in a threatening attempt to scupper that deal, and Zlatan Ibrahimovic permanently burnt his bridges with Juventus fans by joining their rivals Inter Milan after Juve were relegated as a result of the Calciopoli scandal, and he subsequently stated that he'd always supported Inter as a child. All would be worthy, and quite frankly incredible inclusions, and they would have featured for most other seasons, but Ashley Cole's move from Arsenal to Chelsea is perhaps the most controversial of the Premier League era. Cole was the best left-back in England, if not in the world, but this saga began all the way back in January 2005, when Chelsea held a secret meeting with Cole and his representatives. The so-called tapping up scandal, as it came to be known, saw Cole, Chelsea and Mourinho all fined between £75,000 to £300,000 each. Meanwhile, Cole's agent, Jonathan Barnett, one of the most powerful super agents in the world, was fined £100,000 and had his licence suspended for 18 months. Cole made himself fairly unpopular, I think it would be fair to say, not just with Arsenal fans but football fans as a whole, when he stated that he was, and I quote, trembling with anger when Arsenal offered him just £55,000 a week. Hey, look, we've all been there. Cole eventually joined Chelsea, but not before lashing out at Arsenal in his autobiography, signing a lucrative contract and permanently earning himself the nickname Cashley. The deal was remarkable value for Chelsea, who had refused to meet Arsenal's £25 million valuation, claiming that £16 million was their upper limit. In the end, Arsenal accepted just £5 million from Chelsea, plus William Gallas, who would make a very controversial transfer all of his own 4 years later, when he joined Arsenal's North London rivals Tottenham. 2007-08, Javier Saviola to Real Madrid. You might be starting to notice something of a theme emerging here, and that is that, though not all, a great many of the most controversial transfers include a player joining a rival club. Rivalries don't come much bigger, certainly, in terms of prestige, but also hatred and political and historical animus than that of El Clásico between Real Madrid and Barcelona. Probably the most iconic derby in world football, transfers directly between the two clubs are incredibly rare, but in the 2007-08 season, Javier Saviola became the first player since Luís Figo to do it. Once touted as Maradona's heir, Saviola was freakishly good in his teenage years, scoring 45 goals in 86 games and joining Barcelona for £15 million, all before turning 20. Saviola scored 70 goals in 168 games for Barca, a very respectable output, but his first season was his most prolific. There was a sense in which he had somewhat stagnated, and in the summer of 2007, his contract in Catalonia expired. Real Madrid leapt at the opportunity to add Saviola to their ranks on a free transfer, offering him a massive contract, and to substantial controversy, the Argentine said yes. Barca fans may have been outraged at the time at, like Spurs with Campbell, having lost Savio both for nothing and to their biggest rivals, but in some ways, they would have the last laugh. Saviola's wages became a significant burden upon Madrid, and they only got 5 goals in 29 games over the next 2 seasons in return, as he struggled with a series of injuries. 2008-09, Emre Belözoğlu to Fenerbahce. Kenny Miller joined Rangers in the summer of 2008, becoming the first player since Tom Dunbar in the 1890s to cross the old firm divide twice, which went down about as well as you'd probably imagine. Meanwhile, Harry Kewell made the controversial decision to join Galatasaray that summer, infuriating Leeds United fans, given that Kewell played for Leeds when 2 of their supporters were stabbed to death by Galatasaray fans. Both, of course, were very contentious, but it is another Turkish Super League signing, Emre Belözoğlu, who joined Fenerbahce from Newcastle United, that sparked the most outrage of all. The controversy stemmed from the fact that Belözoğlu, a hate-filled racist who won over 100 caps for Turkey, was a graduate of the Galatasaray Academy, who left the club to join Inter Milan following over 150 appearances in 2001. Belözoğlu left Gala with their blessing to a certain extent back then, such was his talent and the size of the club that he was joining, but returning to Turkey to sign for Fenerbahce, well, that was deemed unforgivable. Galatasaray versus Fenerbahce, known as the Intercontinental Derby, is the biggest rivalry in Turkey and among the most intense, and often the most aggressive, in all of world football. Enraged Galatasaray supporters launched an official anti-Belözoğlu campaign, and the midfielder hardly calmed tensions when he revealed that he had always been a Fenerbahce fan. 2009-10, Carlos Tevez to Manchester City. Michael Owen joined Manchester United in the summer of 2009, a move which ensured that he would be hated by every fan base for the foreseeable future. Manchester United fans never fully took to Owen, owing to his associations with Liverpool. Liverpool fans passionately despised Owen because he was a club legend who joined Man United. Newcastle fans hate Owen because he took a massive wage but has always openly stated that he never wanted to play for them and jumped ship as soon as he could. And Real Madrid fans are fairly ambivalent about Owen, given that he didn't really stick around for a very long time. In some ways, it is unfair given that, as Owen has said, his only options in the summer of 2009 were Man United, Everton or Hull City, the first 2 of whom would both have enraged Liverpool fans. Meanwhile, Hull City, my club, went on to be relegated that season. So, really, his move to Man United is no reason to hate Michael Owen. No, you should do that because he is a barely sentient, fashion-adjacent vacuum of personality. Anyway, Owen doesn't take this segment, Carlos Tevez does, having turned down the opportunity to join Manchester United on a permanent basis following 2 years at the club in favour of a move to their cross-city rivals Manchester City. Tevez's move, in the same summer as Cristiano Ronaldo's to Real Madrid, massively depleted Manchester United's squad and reputation in a manner that one could argue they have never fully recovered from, despite Fergie still managing to win 2 more league titles. It signalled Man City's intent, and massive resources of course, which have since reshaped English football in the years that followed, as well as spawning the famous Welcome to Manchester poster that is still talked about all these years on. 2010-11, Fernando Torres to Chelsea. Liverpool and Chelsea aren't really rivals in the traditional sense, but it became an iconic competitive rivalry during the 2000s when the 2 teams seemed to meet about 6 times a season. It was in that context that, halfway through the 2010-11 season, Chelsea poached Torres from Liverpool for a British record £50 million transfer fee. Liverpool had previously stated that Torres wasn't for sale at any price, and Torres himself had reiterated that his commitment to Liverpool was the same now as the day that he signed. Yeah, talk is cheap in football. Torres' deadline day deal panicked Liverpool into paying £35 million for Andy Carroll, though, to be perfectly honest, both turned out to be pretty terrible signings. Torres' legacy at Chelsea is slightly complicated by his contribution to their Champions League and Europa League triumphs, though no one could deny that he was a shadow of the player that he had been at Anfield. Meanwhile, Carroll looked fairly out of his depth at Liverpool, thoroughly outshone, although there is no shame in that, by fellow January arrival Luis Suarez. 2011-12. Glenn Murray to Crystal Palace. In the summer of 2011, Glenn Murray did the unthinkable. That's right, he swapped Brighton and Hove Albion for Crystal Palace. Alright, I know what some of you'll be thinking. Brighton versus Palace is hardly Real Madrid versus Barcelona, or Galatasaray versus Fenerbahce. Most people don't even know why they're rivals, but the fact of the matter is that they are, and Murray's move to Palace went down about as well in Brighton as Wilfried Zaha turning up and taking a massive dump in front of a group of children on their pier. Murray scored 22 goals for Brighton in the 2011-12 season, firing the Seagulls to the League One title, but after rejecting multiple contract offers to stay on the South Coast, he headed straight down the A23 or N23 to sign for Brighton's biggest rivals. Murray went on to become a big fan favourite at Selhurst Park, scoring 47 goals in 125 games, before actually rejoining Brighton in 2017, where he would enjoy his best goal-scoring seasons in the Premier League. 2012-13. Antonio Cassano to Inter Milan. I very nearly went for Robin van Persie for the 2012-13 season, who switched from Arsenal to Manchester United as the Premier League's Golden Boot winner and arguably the league's best player, was pretty controversial. But there are two other strong contenders, and I don't want this video to feel too English or Premier League centric. One was Israel's Eren Zahavi, who joined Maccabi Tel Aviv, outraging fans of his former club and Maccabi's biggest rivals, Hapoel Tel Aviv, but it is Antonio Cassano who left AC Milan after they had nursed him back to full health from temporary brain damage and a heart operation, only for him to request a transfer, owing to the sales of Zlatan Ibrahimovic and Thiago Silva, up sticks, and join their cross-city rivals Inter Milan. Some thanks, eh? Cassano only lasted a single season at Inter Milan because, shock horror, he had a massive falling out with manager Andrea Stramaccioni. Honestly, Cassano is one of the most naturally gifted and instinctively brilliant footballers that I have ever seen. And if he didn't have the brain of a 5-year-old child who had overdosed on Blue Smarties, one can only imagine the career that he could have had. 2013-14. Kenneth Vermeer to Feyenoord. Dutch international goalkeeper Kenneth Vermeer, who, interestingly enough, never conceded a single goal for the Netherlands, winning 5 caps and keeping 5 clean sheets, against some decent opposition in Germany, Estonia, Romania, Indonesia and Spain, did the unforgivable in the summer of 2013, leaving Ajax to sign for Feyenoord. It was only a €1 million fee, and Vermeer had played second fiddle for much of his last season in Amsterdam, but Ajax to Feyenoord is just a no-no. Vermeer's move came as a massive shock, and Ajax supporters felt betrayed. Reportedly, Ajax had allowed Vermeer to leave for a cut-price fee, owing to his service to the club, and he had told them that he would join AZ, before forcing through a move to Feyenoord at the 11th hour. One Ajax fan was banned from the club's stadium and prosecuted after hanging a doll depicting Vermeer by its neck. Special mentions for Alexander Pato's move to Sao Paulo, that one was just a loan move, but nonetheless caused a fair amount of controversy, Mario Götze leaving Borussia Dortmund for Bayern Munich, and Radamel Falcao joining Monaco when he was literally one of, if not the best striker in the world. 2014-15. Stevan de Voort to Anderlecht. It won't have made many headlines outside of Belgium, but when Stevan de Voort joined Anderlecht in the summer of 2014, riots very nearly engulfed the streets of Wallonia. Belgium's Clásico is competed between Anderlecht and Standard Liège, and de Voort previously spent 5 seasons starring for Standard. He had a stint at Porto in between his move to Anderlecht, but that was of little solace to any Standard supporters. When Standard next faced Anderlecht, their supporters unveiled a banner depicting de Voort's severed head with the caption "Red or Dead." De Voort responded by belting a ball into the crowd, and the referee responded by showing him a red card. 2015-16. Kasper Hämäläinen to Legia Warsaw. Forget Maxi Pereira joining Porto from Benfica, or even Raheem Sterling's move from Liverpool to Manchester City. The most controversial move of the 2015-16 season was Kasper Hämäläinen's switch from Lech Poznan to Legia Warsaw. I am aware that any non-Poles watching this are probably in need of some context. Not only are Lech and Legia big rivals, making this move a total no-no in Poland, Hämäläinen, who is from Finland, reportedly told Lech that he was homesick and requested that they terminate his contract. Believing Hämäläinen's claim that he was depressed in Poland, Lech cancelled his contract, only for him to go and sign for Legia. As you can see here, Warsaw really isn't much closer to Finland than Poznan, which is why Lech fans refer to Hämäläinen almost exclusively as a traitor and a whore. When Lech played Legia, Hämäläinen wasn't allowed to travel on the team bus due to security concerns, and instead travelled to the game by private transport. 2016-17. Matty Taylor to Bristol City. It would have been easy for me to pick Gonzalo Higuain for the 2016-17 season, who Napoli fans dreamed would be their modern-day Maradona, only for him to accept a contract with Juventus after they triggered his release clause, but that €90 million deal has nothing on Matty Taylor committing the cardinal sin. That's right, he crossed the Bristol divide. Taylor was the star man at Bristol Rovers, where he had scored 68 goals in 134 games, inspiring them to promotion from both the National League and League Two up into League One. He had already scored 19 goals halfway through the 2016-17 season at the Memorial Stadium, which was his first playing in League One, putting him in extremely high demand. There are 92 clubs in the EFL and the Premier League though, and thousands more abroad. Taylor could have joined literally any one of them, other than Bristol City, and he would have left with most Bristol Rovers fans' blessing. So where did he go? That's right, Bristol bloody City, for just £300,000.
I feel physically sick, to be honest. I'm rapidly falling out of love with football. I just wonder what's the point anymore, you know.
In the end, Taylor was pretty dreadful at Ashton Gate, only scoring 9 goals in 75 games before rediscovering his goal-scoring form in League One with Oxford United. Taylor was the first player to make a direct move from Rovers to City since Trevor Morgan in 1987, and the convenience of not having to move house for his family was probably somewhat undermined by the constant death threats, breeze blocks being put through his car window, and, to this day, Taylor claims, he hasn't been able to return to Bristol city centre. 2017-18. Neymar Jr to PSG. Alexis Sanchez following in Robin van Persie's footsteps and leaving Arsenal for Manchester United, along with Diego Costa going on strike at Chelsea to force through a return to Atletico Madrid, would both be very worthy inclusions for the 2017-18 season. But it is difficult to overlook Neymar Jr.'s world record-breaking move to PSG. A seismic moment in the history of modern football, Neymar didn't just break the world record, he absolutely demolished it. The €222 million that PSG paid for Neymar was more than double the previous world record, namely Paul Pogba's €105 million return to Manchester United. It sent shockwaves through the world of football, firstly that PSG were willing to pay it, and Barcelona were powerless to stop them, due to it being Neymar's release clause. Secondly that Neymar would want to leave Barcelona, where he was starring alongside Luis Suarez and Lionel Messi, in one of the greatest front threes of all time, to join PSG. And thirdly, the sheer size of the fee, which seemed to reset the entire transfer market, and still hasn't come close to being broken over 7 years on. 2018-19. Malcom to Barcelona. From a Barcelona incoming to a Barcelona outgoing, while the fee for Neymar was enormous, it wasn't too big for Barcelona to rapidly go and spunk it all and then some on some absolute tripe. Actually, that is an unfair framing. They signed some very good players, but for ridiculous fees, barely any of whom worked out. Ousmane Dembele, Philippe Coutinho and Antoine Griezmann were signed for a combined €370 million, constituting a major factor in why Barcelona have spent the last few years in a major financial crisis. Meanwhile, Brazilian wideman Malcom set the club back €42 million. Malcom's move was controversial because the Bordeaux star was previously on the verge of joining Roma, so close in fact, that Roma supporters had actually gathered at the city's airport in anticipation of his arrival. Before the Brazilian had signed on the dotted line though, Barcelona swooped in and turned his head. Outraged, Roma's sporting director Monchi claimed that the club was considering legal action against the Catalan giants. Malcom was fairly underwhelming in his sole season at the Camp Nou, though less financially ruinous than some of their other signings, as they sold him for almost the exact same fee the following summer to Zenit St. Petersburg. 2019-20. Jasper Cillessen and Neto to Valencia and Barcelona. Barcelona seem to have been involved in a lot of controversial transfers, haven't they? By my count, this is the 5th Barca incoming or outgoing to feature, and the 3rd in quick succession, as well as being the only joint inclusion in this video. By 2019-20, Barca's spending was beginning to come home to roost, and they were in danger of falling foul of certain spending regulations. As many of you will know, when football clubs buy and sell players, the transfer fee is recorded as immediate revenue in the case of a sale, but spread out over the length of the contract in the case of an arrival, in a process that is known in accounting as amortization. Now, far be it from me to suggest that might have been what was happening with Barcelona signing Neto to become their new number 2 for a potential €35 million from Valencia, while selling their existing number 2 Jasper Cillessen, also to Valencia, for €35 million. No, that would be an outrageous allegation, as would suggesting that any funny business may have been going on when Barca signed Miralem Pjanic for a potential €65 million from Juventus and sold Artemelo to Juventus for a potential €82 million in the same window. No, I wouldn't dare suggest anything like that. There hasn't been an official investigation yet. It was probably just a weird coincidence, 2 players transferring to and from the same club for seemingly inflated fees. Perfectly normal stuff. I don't even know why I'm suggesting it's controversial. Shouldn't really have featured in this video. Moving on. 2020-21. Dani Parejo to Villarreal. From a trio of successive Barcelona inclusions to a couple of consecutive Valencia transfers, whether or not Valencia were involved in any funny business, I couldn't possibly comment, but the fact that Peter Lim was destroying the club by the summer of 2020 is a matter of public record. I covered it in an entire video. Lim had already flogged the likes of Otamendi, Mustafi, Cancelo and Zaza over the preceding few years, but in the 2020-21 season, he took things to yet new heights. Or lows. Ferran Torres, Rodrigo and Jeffrey Kondogbia were all sold for big fees in what felt a lot like asset stripping to Valencia fans, but the most painful loss of all was probably Dani Parejo. Adored by Valencia fans, Parejo had starred at the Mestalla for 9 seasons and captained the club for 6. In the summer of 2020 though, Valencia let him join their local rivals Villarreal on a free transfer, along with teammate Francis Coquelin. Parejo didn't want to leave and broke down in tears when sharing the news of his departure. Valencia supporters were incensed, both at losing one of the best players in La Liga for nothing, but also at losing him to local neighbours that they have historically considered, with good reason, to be their much smaller rivals. It was symbolic of Valencia's mismanagement, fire sales and lack of ambition, and it led to a series of intense protests against owner Peter Lim. 2021-22. Hakan Çalhanoğlu to Inter Milan. The 2021-22 season was the best of the modern era when it came to controversial transfers. Steven Berghuis joined Ajax from Feyenoord, João Mario joined Benfica following a season on loan at Sporting, having come through the Sporting youth ranks as well, and Hakan Çalhanoğlu moved directly from AC Milan to Inter Milan. This was maybe the toughest call in this video then, but Çalhanoğlu left AC Milan to join Inter on a free transfer after the latter had just won the league and immediately started slagging off his former club. So, he takes it. Plenty of players have played for both Milan clubs over the years, but few transfers have drawn as much ire, and few players are as hated by the Rossoneri faithful as Çalhanoğlu. 2022-23. Milos Ninkovic to Western Sydney Wanderers. Milos Ninkovic is a former Serbian international who starred for the likes of Dinamo Kyiv and Red Star Belgrade before moving to Australia at the age of 30. Ninkovic joined Sydney FC, becoming the first player since Alessandro Del Piero to wear the club's number 10 shirt. Over the next 7 years, despite his advanced age, Ninkovic became not just a Sydney, but an A-League legend, widely regarded as one of the division's greatest ever marquee players. Following 221 games, 41 goals, 39 assists, 7 trophies, 2 A-League Player of the Year awards, and 5 PFA A-League Team of the Year inclusions, Sydney FC were unable to agree a new contract extension with Ninkovic. According to the club, and their manager Steve Corica, they wanted Ninkovic to retire there, and the only stumbling block in negotiations was the fact that he refused to get Australian citizenship, despite being eligible, which denied Sydney of an extra foreign player slot. According to Ninkovic, on the other hand, Sydney tried to force him into getting citizenship, telling him that it was either that or retirement, making him feel disrespected after 7 years of service to the club. Whatever the truth of those two accusations, claims, or testimonies, Ninkovic subsequently signed for Western Sydney Wanderers, Sydney FC's biggest rivals. Former teammate Alex Brose described the move as, quote, a slap in the face, and in Ninkovic's first Sydney derby after crossing the divide, the Sky Blue supporters unveiled a tifo reading, quote, legends are cherished, traitors' legacies will perish, with a depiction of Ninkovic's number 10 shirt being burnt. Ninkovic assisted the only goal in Wanderers' first win at the Allianz Stadium in 9 years in that game, but in the final series that season, it was his former club who would have the last laugh. When Ninkovic entered the Sydney FC dressing room to congratulate his former teammates, Steve Corica kicked him out, causing a further spark in tensions. Ninkovic retired at the end of last season, age 40, following 2 seasons at Western Sydney Wanderers. 2023-24, Jordan Henderson to Al Ettifaq. Jordan Henderson's football abilities may always have divided opinion, although I don't think that they should. At his peak, for a number of years, he was absolutely sublime and crucial to a fantastic team, but even those who doubted his talents on the pitch would have struggled not to respect him as a person. Henderson refused to leave Liverpool when pressured to join Fulham, took on the daunting task of replacing Steven Gerrard as club captain, and became the first Liverpool player to lift the Premier League title. Off the pitch, likewise, Henderson was instrumental in raising millions of pounds for the NHS during the COVID-19 pandemic, uniting Premier League captains and players behind his fundraising drive, and he became maybe the most outspoken ally, in English football at least, of the LGBT community, speaking out in support of them and their right to feel welcome and included within the world of football on social media. When Henderson moved to Saudi Arabia last summer, therefore, one of the most repressive and homophobic countries on the planet, where LGBT people aren't just not welcome at football matches, they are criminalised and can potentially be killed, it seemed like, well, you know, a bit of a betrayal. Henderson hardly helped matters when he gave a car crash interview to The Athletic, making all sorts of wild claims about wanting to spread the game of football around the world, and money not having been his motivation in joining Saudi giants Al Ettifaq, who sometimes play in front of as many as 1,000 fans. Henderson's move to Al Ettifaq wasn't just one of the most controversial transfers in recent times, it was also perhaps the stupidest. Henderson trashed his reputation, betrayed an entire community, and lost his place in the England squad, all for the sake of 6 months in Saudi Arabia, or Bahrain technically, which is where Henderson actually lived, and as if all of that wasn't bad enough, he didn't even make any money out of it, reportedly, having reportedly deferred his wages for the first 6 months to avoid paying additional tax in the United Kingdom. Truly, a masterclass in clown shoe behaviour.
Congratulations, you played yourself.
2024-25, Mason Greenwood to Marseille. It maybe says something about the direction that football is heading in when the first 90% of this video is players joining rival clubs, or seismic controversial transfers for other reasons, and then the last 2 are a bloke who went to Saudi Arabia despite claiming to be an LGBT ally, and Marseille signing someone who there is overwhelming evidence to believe is guilty of truly heinous crimes. Of course, Mason Greenwood has never been convicted of anything because the key witness in the case against him after he was arrested, namely his girlfriend, withdrew her testimony, making it practically impossible for the Crown Prosecution Service to secure a conviction. The video, audio, and photographic evidence against Greenwood, however, which neither he nor any of his clubs or representatives have ever attempted to deny, it should be said, at least as far as I'm aware, leave no one who has watched, heard, or looked at any of them in any doubt as to what he did and who he is. It is a stain on football, quite frankly, that Manchester United tried to rehabilitate Greenwood's reputation, only U-turning on attempting to reintegrate him due to pressure from supporters groups and sponsors, that Getafe, the most grotesque club in La Liga, took him on loan last season, and now that Marseille have signed him. Getafe was one thing, everyone knows that they are a moral vacuum of a football club, even their owner is a Real Madrid fan who is desperate to become Madrid president one day and ditch them, but Marseille are the biggest club in France, the only French club to have been crowned as European champions, and have an enormous fan base. That they have signed Greenwood, knowing all they know, is a permanent mark of shame against them, against Roberto De Zerbi, the mealy-mouthed coward, and against a wonderful city where many, including the mayor of Marseille, Benoit Payan, staunchly opposed Greenwood's arrival. Payan stated, quote, "I do not want my club to be covered in shame," reflecting the views of plenty of Marseille fans, but his views, theirs, and those of charities who oppose sexual and physical violence against women were ignored by an owner, Frank McCourt, and a president, Pablo Longoria, who have shown a shameful disregard for women, that is, half of the world's population right there, and decent people of all genders, where, hopefully, you can add in another few billion. Hopefully. It is a depressing place to end this video, but it would have been a bit disingenuous of me to include Mbappe to Madrid or Sessegnon returning to Fulham, just to end on a happier note. So that is it for today's video, but thank you all very much, as ever, for watching. Hit the like button if you enjoyed today's video, let me know your thoughts down below in the comments, and of course, it goes without saying, doesn't it? Make sure that you are subscribed not just to this channel, HITC Sevens, but as I said in the introduction, also my second channel, Alfie Potts Armour, both of which should be about to appear on your screens now, along with a couple of videos that you might fancy watching after this one. And you can also find me on Twitter, Instagram, or Threads by the username at HITC Sevens on all three, should you wish to do so. And all of those links, plus a whole lot more good stuff, should be down in the video description below. Cheers.